Hey, this is Don from Padlock Technologies again with another video. This time we're going to talk about service insertion or firewall service insertion with NDFC. Now, if you don't know anything about that, I did a video on how to manually do this. I'll put the link up here above my head. Watch that video so you at least know how to do it manually. So when you try to do it on NDFC, you kind of know what's going on underneath the hood. So this is basically the simple fabric design. We have a Palo Alto this time that we're going to use as the firewall. In the other video, I used a Cisco FTD, so it doesn't really matter the firewall that you're going to use at the end. I just wanted to show you that you can do it in multiple firewalls, but this one I want to do a Palo Alto firewall. Right now we have NDFC over here in the corner. It's controlling this fabric, and we have our servers down here. Now we have two tenants. It's going to be tenant 1, tenant 2. And for tenant 1 to talk to tenant 2, it must go through the firewall. So this firewall is going to be your OBEW firewall, which is outbound east-west. And then when it needs to go to the internet, it'll just go straight to this router down here. Now, again, go watch the other video that I put the link up for to learn what's going on underneath the hood. It's a little bit of configuration madness in that video, meaning you better know what you're doing from a routing perspective to get it to work. With NDFC, they kind of simplify it, and we're going to be using a static route. We're going to use static routes for this. You can use eBGP, but I'm not going to do that in this example. So now that you know what's going on and what we're going to do, let's go to NDFC, and I'll show you a simple way how to do this. All right, so we're in the dashboard here. Let me log in. All right, so we're in here. It takes me to the admin console. We need to really go to the fabric controller. And as you can see, I got one fabric in here. Here's my topology for the one fabric. All right, so basically this is a physical representation of our logical representation of what the physical design looks like. So you saw that before, and now you're going to see, the logical aspects of this. And as you can see, for my service insertion, it has the service insertion icon right here coming off of the border leaf. Now this is going to come off a border leaf, not really a border gateway. So you definitely have to make sure you assign the right roles for the devices in the fabric. So now let's go to the fabric here, jump into that. And first we're gonna go to switches so y'all understand what I meant by assign the right roles. As you can see, I have a spine, spine, leaf, leaf, border, right? Now border gateway. This is the border is where the service insertion is gonna be. So now that you got everything set up here, and again, if you don't know anything about that, I have videos on just overview of NDFC. So go ahead and watch that, and you'll see how to at least set up a fabric. I even did multi-site and all that good stuff. So I'm not going to bore you with that. So to do service insertion, you need to go to services. So let me stop right here. You might see some other YouTube videos on how to do this, and they're using the older version of NDFC. I'm telling you right now, it is not the same. So if you go and look at some other videos and you're looking at my screen and you're like, wait a minute, I don't have the same, that's not the same version of NDFC that I saw in the previous videos, you are 100% correct. Those are older versions of NDFC. This is the newer version. This is, I think, 3.2.2. So it's semi-new. I think there's more newer versions, but they kind of do the same thing. So here's my plea to Cisco. If this is the way we're going to do it, keep it this way. Don't come out with version 4 and then you change up the whole menus. That's just don't do that, please. So the way we're going to do this is, if you would think logically looking at this that it's left to right, no, it's right to left. Because if you go left to right, it's just going to take you to the next menu to configure all this stuff. So I'm just going to tell you right now, to avoid the headache of trying to figure out what you actually got to configure, it's right to left. So you got to start with the service cluster, the service function, and then service insertion, instead of doing it the other way around. Now, we're not going to do service change or audit history. You don't really have to worry about that. But this gives you the kind of an example of what you can do. And what we're doing here is service insertion. And as you can see, it shows you what it is. Like if B wants to talk to A, it needs to go through a firewall, and that's our load balancer or whatever. That's exactly what we're doing. So the first thing we need to do is go to service cluster. Now your service cluster is where you're going to pick what you're going to do. And as you see it's going to be a firewall. It's a standalone firewall and it's a physical form. So that's the Palo Alto, right? And if I click down here, you create your service node. So your service node is basically what you're going to use to do service insertion. I named it Palo Alto. The service node is going to be, the interface is going to be on my border leaf on Ethernet 1.3. So we go back here. It's this interface right here that says trunk. And that's very important, by the way. As you can see, it's attached to border leaf 5 switch interface. Link is the outside. Okay. So once you have that, now you have to go to the service function. So now the service function is going to tell you what kind of service insertion you're going to do. This is a 2-arm mode. There's a 1-arm mode, but I did 2-arm mode. So that tells you that tenant 2 is considered my outside VRF. Tenant 1 is considered the inside VRF. So if you think of it from a firewall perspective, LAN, WAN, 2 zones. Think of these VRFs as zones in the firewall, and then it references the service cluster that references the service node, right? This is why I said go right to left, not left to right. And if we go down here, this here is where we actually tell it, hey, what do we want to do for the service insertion? Now they used to do PBR, and I was getting ready to try to see, oh, where's the PBR policy that you got to do for this? But this actually puts the routes in the routing tables because I'm using static right now, right? So if I go to details here, and do I want to go, when I go to service insertion, I'm gonna give you a little bit more detail for this because this only shows you a little bit. It doesn't show you what I'm actually doing. And then after that, you go to service insertion, which you'll reference all of this. So you'll reference the service function in the service insertion. So if I go to action, can I edit this? Just so you can see it, it's going to be read only because it's attached right now. So if we go here, this is basically everything I just told you. So you'd have the use case. See, it says Inter-VRF, Inter-Tenant service redirection. Here's your outside VRF, your inside VRF, which are my 2 tenants. It's attached right now. It's attached to this using the service function. You see how you go on left. If you go left or right, now you have to build the service function. Again, don't do it that way. Then if we go to, is it details here? I want to show you the routing to this. Okay, so now we edit that and we see the service function, which is the 2-arm connectivity mode. Here is the cluster name or the connectivity, basically how I'm going to route. If we go to edit here, now let me explain this. So what you're going to do is for the outside network, and this is the confusing part because if you look at the other videos, they don't really explain this. So this outside service IP is the IP address that's on the firewall, that's on my sub interface. So basically what you're saying when you do the routing, it's saying, hey, go to this outside IP address, which is basically on the firewall. Same thing on the inside. Don't get confused with outside and inside. It's basically the interface on the firewall, at least for this. Now for your tenant, what's going to end up happening is it will build these networks here. Now I'm explaining what the outside service network basically is. So what you're going to do is you're going to create another network, another VLAN, another VNI, all that stuff. And you're going to put it in the tenant that you want to do the service insertion for. So tenant 1 will have its own one. So as you can see, I just built another network and I said put it in VRF tenant 1. And I did another network and said put it in VRF tenant 2. It's assigned to this VLAN ID and this VLAN ID. And those are the VLANs that are going to get pushed down to the firewall from the border leaf. So you got to this is where the trunking is important because you got to say, hey, allow these VLANs to go down. And then the gateway IP obviously is the gateway on the switches. So this is basically your SVI on the border leaves. Now, when you go to the peering option, is static. And just to review, this IP address, when I show you the Palo Alto, will be on the Palo Alto sub interfaces. So at the end of the day, when I put the routing in there and say, hey, go to this IP address, the IP address will be on the firewall. Now, from a routing detail perspective, we'll just use one. I created one that says Tenant 1 PB, Tenant 2 PBR, but it's technically not PBR. I just named it that. So from a view details perspective, when you pop open the details, here's the static routes. So I'm saying in Tenant 2, if you want to get to Tenant 1's subnet, you need to go to that outside service IP, which is 172.16.5.1. Then I had a static route, a default route that says, hey, if you want to get out to the internet, you're to go to 172.16.5.1. And this is the service insertion, because you can actually send it to, I could just send this to anywhere I want it, because all I need to do is say, okay, the outside service IP is some different IP. It could be a load balance, it could be whatever. But this time we're just making it a firewall. Now, for these routes only, it's going to send that traffic to my firewall. And then for anything else, like within the tenant, obviously that traffic is going to stay within tenant. For anything outside, obviously it's going to go to the firewall, because the default route is saying go to the firewall. And that's the part that I really wanted to show you guys, because without explaining it, without seeing that, you kind of don't know what's going on. So after all that's done, you have to attach it, right? If you detach it, it removes the routes, but if you attach it, it creates those static routes. Now, from a VRF perspective, again, these are my two tenants. Here's my networks and their respective tenants. Now, from a switch perspective, once everything is there, from the service insertion part, the critical part here is the link. And I'm just going to say NX05. The link, which is 3, as you see right here, right there, Ethernet 3. I had to go in here and I had to edit the interface. I had to make it a trunk for one. And then I had to allow those VLANs for the service insertion. I had to allow it on that trunk, because without that, you won't be able to get to the firewall interface, because they're sub interfaces. So once you do that and you push it down to the port, now we'll look at it from the Nexus standpoint. When all that's said and done, and we'll look at the interface, and there you go. So we made it a trunk link, and we're allowing those two VLANs that's on there, right? We're allowing it to basically go down on a trunk. And if I do show run interface VLAN 2302, there's the SVI for that one, for tenant 2, and here's the SVI for tenant 1. So all of that got configured basically with that service insertion. Now on the Palo side, let's log into the Palo here. And the Palo is very basic. Just for this demonstration, it's kind of pretty wide open here. I wouldn't suggest you do that in real life, but to demonstrate this, I wanted you guys to see it. Taking forever. You know, this thing is going to pop up as always. And then a reminder is going to pop up. Remind me later. Don't really care. So from a networking standpoint, let's look at the interfaces. Now, remember in the service insertion, I said go to 172.16.1.5. That's subinterface 2.2. 6.1 is subinterface 2.1. You see the VLANs that are applied to that are tagging. So that's why you needed that trunk link, because without this tagging, you'll never be able to hit these interfaces. And then obviously I got my outside interface. Now from a policy perspective, I have two rules here. I have a rule for inter-tenant communication, just saying tenant 1 to tenant 2 can talk to each other, tenant 1 to tenant 2 can talk to each other. And then I have my default internet just for the ping test to say, hey, if it's coming from tenant 1 or tenant 2 going to the outside, allow that traffic. And then obviously I need to do the NAT rule. So I have one for tenant 1 and one for tenant 2. Okay. So that's the simple firewall setup. So now, what did that service insertion actually do? I'll show you. So we're going to go to leaf 1. So if we go into leaf 1, and I go show IP route VRF tenant 1. As you can see, this is the important one. You see that quad 0 is saying, hey, go to 172.1.172.16.6.1, right? That was that static route that I put in the service insertion for the default route. Like, hey, if you want to get there, go here. And then the other one is to go to tenant 2, which is 172.16.3.0 subnet. To go there, go to 172.16.6.1. That's what it actually did. It put routes, because I use static routes, by the way. It put routes in the routing table to say, hey, if you want to go to the next tenant, inter-tenant communication, you need to go to the firewall, and I can do my inspection and all that good stuff there. Same thing I did manually in the other video. And if I want to go to the internet, go to the firewall as well. So this is NDFC handling all of that stuff without me having to manually do it. And you could make mistakes doing it manually, right? And then if you don't know what you're looking at, you're going to run into a problem later on. Because when it breaks, you're like, I don't know, where did it break? Did it break in the insertion part? Did it break in the routing part? Did I put something wrong? So NDFC is pretty cool to handle this stuff. So let's go to 2, and you'll see the same thing, but different next hops. So this default route for tenant 2 is 5.1, which is subinterface 2.2 on the firewall. And then to get to, where are we at? There we go. And to get to 2.0, which is tenant 1, go to 5.1, which is 2.2 on the firewall. So that's what your service insertion has done. Now let's test this out. So let's say, I think something wrong with this, with at least that machine. Let's go to 2 here. So if we go show IP, you will see I'm in 2.2. Now let me validate that server 1 is having an issue here. And all right, so I can ping it. For some reason, I just can't get to the console. So that's technically VCP 6. All right. Now, if I wanted to go to VPC 7, which I think is 3.1, 3.1, I can ping it perfectly fine. Now, my Palo Alto monitoring is, I think on this version, there's a flaw in this version. So I can't really go to session browser and show you that. But from a policy perspective, we can look at the hit count and you can see that the policy was actually being hit. And yeah, hit count. So as you can see, the hit counter. Let's just validate some more. So I'm gonna drag this over here to the Palo thing. We'll do that ping test again. And then might take a little time for the counter to go up. Up, counter just went up. So as you can see, it was 20, now it's 25. That validates that traffic is going through the firewall when going from tenant 1 to tenant 2. And then if I wanted to go to just ping Google or something like that, as you can see, it is going through to Google for the ping test, and that should validate rule number 2. So it's on 20. That should go to 25 as well. Come on. It's taking a little long. I'll give some time to refresh. But we know it's going out, so here we go. Takes a little long. So that is service insertion with NDC in a nutshell. Let me get back out of this, and then we'll talk about this a little bit more. So that was the lab. That, again, is using a management platform like NDFC to do service insertion. If it were up to me, you're probably going to ask, what should I use? I would go with NDFC versus manual, right? Because if you don't know anything from, especially from a VXLAN, mp-bgp fabric kind of thing, there's a lot of moving parts there. So if something goes wrong, there's a lot of stuff you got to try to figure out if you did something wrong. Case in point, VNI to VLAN mapping, multicast is set up, or the SVIs on every one of your fabric leaves. All kind of stuff can go wrong. NDFC kind of hides all that stuff behind the hood. And in my personal opinion, NDFC is kind of better than ACI. In my opinion. Now I know my ACI people will probably fry me for that, but I'm not saying ACI isn't a good product. I'm just saying compared to NDFC, I would go NDFC because it's a lot easier to understand because it's still Nexus iOS. When you get to ACI, it changes the way it looks underneath the hood, and that could be kind of hard from a troubleshooting perspective for people trying to get into data center networking. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Really enjoyed doing it. If you did, don't forget to share, comment, like, and subscribe. Bring people to the channel, especially if you want to see more stuff like this. This is Don from Padlock Technologies again. Thank you, and have a nice day.